Nodding at Maya's words, James made his way over to their shelters, next to one another, though not connected, like Kate and Peter's shelters. If he hadn't been walking around the camp, making sure that monsters didn't sneak up on them, a part of him wondered if there would be any food remaining when everyone woke up. The main reason why he hadn't continued eating was how he didn't want to take up too much time. It wouldn't be good to cause the group to fail the request just because of a stupid mistake. Reaching his shelter, James crouched and grabbed his pack. Only a few minutes were required to have what he needed. Then, it was only a moment to grab Maya's bowl and spoon. Standing up, James saw that Maya was already waiting next to the fire where the monster and rabbits were being kept warm by the embers. Even if the meat was slightly dried out due to being heated for such a long time, it would still taste much better than if it were cold. Here, James passed the bowl and spoon to Maya once he made his way to where she stood. Smiling, she said, "What a gentleman." Turning towards the food, Maya pulled out a small dagger. Not wanting to take up too much space, as everyone was coming over to eat some of the remaining food, James quickly pulled out one of his daggers and began cutting out a large chunk of meat. He watched the juices that spilled out from the meat, from the melted fat that had been allowed to liquefy as the night passed. It meant that the forest cat and rabbits were likely to not be as dry as he worried. Stepping away from the fire to let the others get some, James used his fingers to pick up some of the food. Maya looked content as she ate. "There's still some stew left. We should get some before it's gone," James suggested. Nodding, Maya walked with him over to the other fire. Looking inside the pot, James could see that there was only a quarter of the pot still full of the stew. "Glad that we got here first. I suspect that after everyone gets a bowl, it'll likely be empty," Maya commented. James moved the bowl in his hand towards Maya. She took the bowl in a free hand. Taking the larger spoon used to scoop out the stew, James served it to Maya. Even with the stew having been staying warm for the entire night, the spices and herbs hadn't faded. With each scoop of the stew, James could smell the ingredients. The fragrance only made his mouth fill with saliva. It only took a few spoonfuls before both of their bowls were filled. "Don't take all of it," Peter said to James. James laughed. "I would if he carried larger bowls." Both James and Maya made their way to where some of the others were sitting and relaxing. Another morning, Celine looked above them. Raoul quietly ate some of the forest cat meat in his bowl. "It's going to be like this for a while. I suspect months will pass before we see the sky," James said to Celine after swallowing a spoonful of stew. "It could even be more than a year," Mim chuckled. "It all depends on what happens the deeper we go." Taking another spoonful of the stew, James appreciated the flavors and how the meat fell apart in his mouth with barely any chewing necessary.